Welcome to the in-step coverage of Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. Hope you're excited to go on a hitchhiker's guide through the multiverse of all the wonderful lands and magic. But let's go and start off with our tour guide today, and that's going to be Golos, Mr. Tireless Pilgrim. He's tired because he's looking for sad robots. Somehow they got mixed up, and then they forgot to get each other's numbers. So anyway, that's why he knows about all the different lands of the multiverse. So we have Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. A little bit of backstory lore right there. It's probably wrong. Whenever Golos enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tab, then shuffle your library. Then for a 7-mana activation, 2 colorless Wooburg, exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn without paying their mana cost. Now this deck tech, this is definitely going to be more of a land focused deck because we kind of have our first true lands commander. This is going to be a 5-color commander. And essentially you can just basically make any land in Magic be your commander. You know, it's going to be your kind of sleeper commander because it's going to be able to find it as soon as it enters the battlefield. So as far as some of the top of the library effects, I will cover just a few quick little slides before we jump into the lands part, but the primary focus of this video is going to be making sure that you can end up with some really nice lands and maybe go for a nice mazes in. So let's go and start off with some of the top of this library that's really going to make this commander. You know, you've got Vampiric Tutor, Mystical Tutor, Worldly Tutor, Enlightened Tutor. All the cards are high impact cards that only cost 1 mana. You're going to put that card directly on top of your library, and it's basically going to be a free spell to cast whatever's on there. Same thing with Scroll Rack. You know, Scroll Rack's going to be a wonderful way to set up the top part of your library. You can go for that 1 mana activation, dump a bunch of cards on top, then go for that activation with your commander. You're good to go. Then also, same thing with Brainstorm or even something like Beast Tracker. These are high impact cards that are going to help you kind of further your board state. And you know, with Beast Track, you know, some of the Vampiric Tutor, Enlightened Tutor, Mystical Tutor, those may be a little bit out of your budget. But with a Beast Tracker, you know, that's something you can grab a creature as Death Touch, Hexproof, Reach, or Trample. There's a lot of good targets out there. You can put that on top, and that'll make it a little bit easier for you to kind of cast that spell for free. And of course, Mr. Mullet Man, the Centaur Mullet, and the Hair for Leaves Lady. Congregation at Dawn. This is a wonderful card for the deck. Set your library of up to 3 creature cards, put them on top. That's basically going to be whatever sort of 3-card combo. You want to go for Kiki Jiki, Zealous Conscripts, if you're in the game right then and there with some combo. You want to go double Crater Hoof, Enrace Forerunners, whatever you want to put on top. Let's say you want to put Avenger of Zendikar. It's basically just like a 3-card Tooth and Nail, which is going to be a wonderful way for you to close the game out, whatever that may be. So Congregation at Dawn is definitely one of the high impact cards for the deck, and plus you get to have the mullet man. And I don't know, I always enjoy this art whenever I talk about it because he's got a big mullet, and then you got the hair leaf lady, and then why are they meeting at dawn? I don't know. Anyway, love that card. So that's going to be putting stuff on top of your library. Outside of that, you want to have some sort of bounce support. Panharmonicon, Conjurer's Closet, Vincer. These are all wonderful ways that we want to make sure that we can keep bouncing Golos or whatever sort of value creatures we're going for in the deck. We want to make sure that we can kind of keep that value going over through the game. Let's say you have Panharmonicon down, you go for Conjurer's Closet, you get Golos down, that's going to be double land triggers. Then at the end of your turn, you bounce it again. So you're looking at like 4 lands in one turn with this assortment of cards. And these are just really good, and highly, you know, whatever sort of build you're going to go with Golos, Panharmonicon and Conjurer's Closet is definitely where it's at because that's just going to be some really nice, it's free real estate, some good magic right there. Now, let's move on to the lands. You know, this is a hitchhiker's guide to the different lands of the actual Magic multiverse. One of the cool things about Golos is you can actually make a land in Magic your commander now. So let's say that you want to go Dark Depths Thespian Stage. That's your new commander. You can search it up as soon as it enters the battlefield. Let's say you want to build a mono black deck with Golos as the actual commander. You can go Coffers Urborg. Let's say that you want to build some sort of weird devotion deck, mono blue devotion. You're going to be able to find that card, Guy's Cradle, if you want to build like some sort of elf ball deck. Long story short, you can use this as a Wooburg commander, all 5 colors, or if you just want to build a mono blue devotion. Whatever it is, he's going to be able to find that exact land that you need to make sure your deck can perform. So outside of that, it's going to be a little weird to kind of, you know, if you build this mono black deck where he's the commander, you're not really splashing for any of the colors, that might be a little bit weird, but you know, having some sort of weird mono blue devotion deck with Shrine, that sounds kind of fun, or just being able to really take advantage of Guy's Cradle, or finally having Merit Lage as your actual 2020 indestructible Dark Depths and Thespian Stage. Whatever sort of Lage you, and now of course you can go for Wasteland locks like that, but I didn't put it up here because I don't want people to do that, but it's entirely possible, because once you have it entered the battlefield, that land is officially now your commander, now that you have it on the battlefield. So, now let's jump into the actual lands itself, and that's going to be the support packages, and of course you can run some sort of of dredge option for your deck. Crop rotation, life from the loam, splendid reclamation. These are all wonderful ways to make sure that you can get lands out of your graveyard and make every single land drop each time. I cannot stress how important Life from the Loam is in this deck. I think it's around 20-25 bucks. If you're building a land focused deck with this particular commander, Life from the Loam is very important because this basically enables you to get your game kickstarted. It's going to be hard if you don't have Life from the Loam, because with Life from the Loam, you're going to be dredging your graveyard and you're going to be basically making land drops every single turn. You're going to be filling up your graveyard. That's going to lead to a really nice Splendid Reclamation. It's just basically going to be easier for you to find whatever sort of land card that you need. So let's say that we're going for Maze's End. You can start dredging into some of those guild gates. Let's say we're trying to get Merit Lage on the battlefield. We can dredge into Thespian Stage. You're basically looking at 3 cards per turn because you get to dredge them into your graveyard. Now, you do have to protect your graveyard, or, if somebody's got Rest in Peace, that's really going to shut down your game plan. But if there's no graveyard hate, Life from the Loam will definitely allow you to get that value going, because if you've never built a land deck, one of the big things to keep in mind with the land deck is that the win condition is not necessarily how often you're going to win. Of course you want to win if you're playing this deck, but one of the things you want to keep in mind is it's almost kind of like the journey. So if you just want to build up as much value as possible where you just have this overwhelming value and your opponent can't stop it, and Life from the Loam definitely gets that kick started. Outside of these cards, you want to run Entomb with Life from the Loam into the graveyard. That is some good magic. That really sets the tone for your opponents. And Realms Uncharted. This is basically a 3-mana tutor for 4 land cards, especially with Life from the Loam. You can search your library for 4 land cards with different names. Opponent chooses 2 to put in your hand, 2 go into your graveyard. So you can grab Dark Depths, Thespian Stage, that goes into your hand. You can grab Coffers and Urborg. Depending on what your opponent wants to give you, you can grab some really nice mana packages to where no matter what they give you, you're going to have Ancient Tomb. And then if you have Life from the Loam, you can just bring it back. So you can definitely see where if you're building lands, you want to have this complete cycle between deck, graveyard, and your hand. That's really going to allow you to kind of push forward and just swarm the board with just way too much value. Now, one of the other things that you definitely want to have in your Golos deck is being able to make extra land drops, or at least making land drops off the top of your library. Excavator is going to allow you to play lands out of your graveyard. Azusa Lost But Seeking is going to make those extra land drops for you. And then Oracle, that's going to allow you to look at the top part of your library and make an extra land drop at the same time. So you can kind of sculpt what's going on. There's no better feeling than going Azusa and Oracle and just ripping lands off the top of your library. Because if you are building a land heavy deck, you're probably going to have around 40 lands in here, because you want to make sure that you can take advantage of all these support cards. So being able to just rip cards off the top of your library with Oracle and Azusa, that is some good magic. Outside of these particular land creatures, Course of Crewfix, once again, you're going to get that life gain. That does matter in some games. Wayward Swordtooth, you got to do a little bit of setting up to get that City's Blessing going, but once you do finally have that active, you're good to go to make those extra land drops. And then Secure Tribe Scout, that effect may seem kind of clunky, but, let's say you get Life from the Loam going early, you get down Tribe Scout early, being able to make an extra land drop through an activated ability is a really good option. And then plus, let's say that your opponent has some sort of spot removal. More than likely, if they do, they're probably going to burn it on Tribe Scout because they don't really want to face 2 extra land drops every single turn. So let's say you have the Tribe Scout in your hand and Azusa. You go for Tribe Scout, they get rid of it. Then you can get down Azusa and kind of use it as a placeholder to kind of protect your commander later on with somebody using some sort of spot removal. Outside of the actual extra land drop creatures, you definitely run some sort of option that allows you to kind of interact with your lands. So Sylvan Safekeeper, you can sacrifice these lands. We have Life from the Loam, so it's not really going to matter. You can protect a lot of your high impact creatures. Same thing with Living Twister. You can discard a land card. There's a lot of times with Life from the Loam that where you bring a bunch of lands back out of your graveyard, you just have a lot of lands stuck in your hand. You're like at 7 cards in your hand. So with Living Twister, you can go for that activated ability, deal 2 damage to any target on the battlefield. Then for a green mana activation, you can return a tap land you control to its owner's hand. So let's say you tap down Guy's Cradle, you haven't made the land drop for the turn, bring it back with Living Twister, play it again with the Azusa, tap it again for a ton of mana, bring it back, play it again with the Azusa. Living Twister is definitely what you want to be doing in a land-focused deck. And of course, World Shaper. It's going to allow you to kind of get that extra Life from the Loam dredge into the graveyard, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then whenever it dies, put all lands from your graveyard onto the battlefield tap. So we did talk about Splendid Reclamation earlier. So let's say that we have Splendid Reclamation, we have Sylvan Safekeeper, we sack all of our lands, tap that mana, float that mana, then go for Splendid Reclamation, or maybe something happens to World Shaper, we can bring all those cards back onto the battlefield. Once again, you're just kind of completing that cycle between graveyard, hand, and deck, and you get as many lands as possible on the battlefield. But it is really fun. If you have Sylvan Safekeeper and Splendid Reclamation, no matter what sort of land board state you have, it is always fun to be able to sack them all, bring it back out for a ton of mana. So now, outside of the creature aspect, there's some non-creature lands that really, non-creature utility cards that really help us kind of make our extra land drops. Exploration, Burgeoning, and Crucible of Worlds. Once again, Crucible of Worlds is going to allow us to play out of the graveyard. That's going to complete that little circle cycle. Then Exploration and Burgeoning. If you ever gotten down Burgeoning on turn 1 and your opponents keep making their land drops, it is just so hard to keep up with Burgeoning sometimes. But a lot of these are going to allow you to make that extra land drop and put some really good pressure on your opponent. Now, outside of the extra land drop creatures, you do want to run some sort of high impact land creature package in your deck. That's going to be Gitrog Monster, Tatnova, Titania. If you can't, let's say that we're building a Maze's End deck, but we can't really get the guild gates going, you want to get down to some sort of overwhelming value threat on the battlefield. Tatnova, being able to get a life gain and draw a card every single time a lane enters the battlefield, it's such a nice effect. So let's say we play a fetch lane, that's a card draw and life gain, crack the fetch, grab a dual source. That's going to be another life gain and a card draw. Titania is going to allow us to get those elementals on the battlefield, so next thing you know, we can kind of swarm it up. And the same thing with Gitrog. Whenever a lane enters the battlefield, you saw that we had Sylvan Safekeeper earlier. We sack all the cards of Sylvan Safekeeper, draw a bunch of cards from Gitrog, go for Splendid Reclamation. I don't know, do whatever, have some fun. There's just so many overlapping synergies in this deck. You want to make sure that you can just basically just swarm your opponent out. And the Gitrog, Tatnova, and Titania definitely make that possible. Same thing with Underrealm Lich. It's technically not a Land Matters powerhouse card, but being able to look at the top 3 cards whenever you draw a card. So let's say you have Tatnova on the battlefield and you have Underrealm Lich, then you brainstorm for 3, put the 2 into the graveyard, 1 into your hand. Same thing with Lord Windgrace, just being able to just kind of make sure you have some sort of problem for your opponent. It's just kind of like, deal with this card or I'm going to generate so much value that it's going to be hard to stop you when the time comes for me to win. So, and it's always a lot of fun. If you get any combination of these creatures on the battlefield, it's just like it's like hitting one of those stars in Mario Kart. You're just unstoppable. Now, one of the other ways you can definitely take advantage of a land-heavy deck is going to be some sort of landfall effect. Rampaging Balos, Tireless Tracker is going to give you that nice card advantage with those clue tokens. And then Lotus Cobra. There's a lot of times where you get down Lotus Cobra on turn 2 or turn 3. You start making your fetch land drops. You can generate a ton of mana with Lotus Cobra. And, let's say we have Lotus Cobra on turn 2, turn 3. That's going to enable a pretty quick Rampaging Baloth. Next thing you know, you have a ton of tokens on the battlefield. Lotus Cobra just allows you to do a lot of busted things really quick in a deck that has extra land drops and has fetch lands, because it's basically just going to amplify your mana like crazy. And of course, Seer Sundial and Retreat to Coral Helm. With Retreat to Coral Helm, I think you can run a combo with a Knight of Reliquary. I tend to not run a lot of combos in my deck, but it's at least worth highlighting that. And then Seer Sundial, once again, this deck wants to be able to get as much card draw as possible. So let's say you're kind of a little bit strapped on card advantage in your hand. You've got Life from the Loam going, a ton of lands. Simply just getting down Seer Sundial and being able to pay that 2 mana. You're basically just, it's kind of like a Tireless Tracker, except you just got to pay for that clue token right then and there. But it's nice to have that card advantage, simply just being able to make a land drop, which is exactly what we're going to be doing with this deck. Now, there's a couple different ways that we can actually tutor for specific cards with creatures in here. Ulvenwald Hydra, Weathered Wayfarer, and then Realm Seekers. These are all great options for you to get this down and then tutor up whatever sort of land that you need. Like I mentioned, if you're running Maze's End, that's going to find Maze's End, or let's say you need to find some specific guild gates to make sure you can go for the Maze's End win. All these creatures are going to make sure that happens. Now, as far as Weathered Wayfarer, this is one of those cards that early game it's great, but as you start making a bunch of land drops, it's going to be really hard for you to be able to have that active late game. So you may not want to go super heavy running stuff like Weathered Wayfarer, but it is good to have it out early game because it allows you to kind of grab whatever sort of lands you need. And of course, you can run some sort of instant or sorceries that grab specific lands. So Hour of Promise, Sylvan Scrying, these are all going to allow you to search for a land that you need right then and there and put it in your hand or put it onto the battlefield. So of course, one of the cool things that we're running in here is we're running a lot of guild gates, and so you want to incorporate some sort of untap ability. So, Dimir Guildgate, Golgari Rot Farm, these are going to enter the battlefield tapped. Let's say we toss in Gurk, Wildspeaker, and Amulet of Vigor. These are going to allow these lands to untap whenever they enter the battlefield. With Gurk, Wildspeaker, you can untap up to 2 lands. So let's say we have some of those dual guild gates. That's going to be a lot of mana we can tap and untap with. And then, of course, it just ends up with some really nice board states, especially with Gurk, Wildspeaker, because let's say that we end up going for the untap untap ability to help us get ahead on mana. That's always great. But with that -4 ability from Guruk, we've built up some nice tokens from Rampaging Balefs. We've got Tireless Tracker, or if you just got this motley crew of mana dorks and mana support cards of extra land drop creatures, being able to go for that -4, give all of your creatures +3/+3 and trample is a very good way to try to close the game out, or at the very least, put some good pressure on your opponent. But running some sort of untap option with Amulet of Vigor and Guruk Wildspeaker is definitely going to be good in a deck, especially if you're running Temple cards in here. Being able to have access to that mana and get that extra value whenever it enters is always a good option. Now, that brings us to Maze's End, which is such a fun deck. I can't wait to build it. I'm definitely going Maze's End with Golos. There's just so many different ways you can support this card. Maze's End itself says 3 mana, return it to your hand, search your library for a gate card, put it on the battlefield, and then if you control 10 or more gates with different names, you win the game. So, long story short, you want to get as many guild gates on the battlefield as possible. So District Guide, that's a new card in the new set. It's going to allow you to search your library for a gate card. Same thing with Gate Creeper Vine. And then Maze's End, it's going to allow you to go for those activated abilities. But you saw where we talked about Amulet of Vigor. It's going to enter the battlefield tapped. So once we have Amulet of Vigor on the battlefield, we go for Maze's End. That's going to enter the battlefield untapped. It's going to make those activations a lot easier and really kind of speed up the process of getting those guild gates onto the battlefield. Now, some of the other support cards for a Maze's End deck you may want to kind of keep in mind. You have Guild Summon, enters the battlefield, tap any number of untapped guild gates you control. You can go for some card advantage. Then whenever a gate enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card. Might be a little clunky for a deck like this, kind of depending on how many gate cards you have in there. But it is nice to know of it, of a support card. Circuitous Route is one of the best things for this deck printed recently. It's going to allow you to grab 2 guild gate cards. It's really going to get you ahead on those gate and land drops. And of course, Gatebreaker Ram. Probably not going to be running it. It's going to get +1/+1 for each gate that you control. There's probably better things you can be doing. But if you're going to go full circle, like full force gate, hey, you've got a sheep for your deck. There you go. It is a sheep, official sheep for your Maze's End. But yeah, this is what I was talking about with the lands deck. If you can go for a Maze's End win, if you don't care about your win percentage with the deck, because with one Maze's End win, that's worth like 5 regular wins, and I promise you. So it's just a really fun way to go for an alternative win condition where your opponent's like, yep, you got me. You got all the guild gates. So highly recommend running Maze's End in your Golos deck if you're thinking about building a Lands Matters deck, because it is so fun to go for that. Now, that's going to bring us to Volcano Zombies. Hope you're excited. You can even call your deck Volcano Zombies. I'm sure people will be like, I just want to see this in action. I don't mind losing this because, yeah. This is what makes Magic so great. You get to go for Volcano Zombies. So, let's start off with Scapeshift. We go for Scapeshift. We have Prismatic Omen on the battlefield. And let's say that we have 10 lands on the battlefield once we go for Scapeshift. So, with Prismatic Omen, that's going to make all of our lands every single basic land type. So, all 5 colors. So, we have 10 lands on the battlefield. We go for Scapeshift. That's going to allow us to grab 10 different lands out of our library, put them on the battlefield. Let's say 2 of those 10 are going to be Field of Dead and Valakut. So with Valakut, it says whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you have at least 5 other mountains, you get to deal 3 damage to any target. Now with Prismatic Omen on the battlefield, that says all of our lands are every single basic type, including mountains. So whenever this enters the battlefield, we sacrifice those 10 lands. That's going to be 10 Valakut triggers. That's going to be 30 damage right there. And let's say that we have Field of Ruin and at least 7 different other land names in the deck. Once we grab it off the Scapeshift, with Field of Ruin, whenever it enters your battlefield, I'm pretty sure you just get 10 zombies, but it might amplify out, but either way, you're looking at 30 damage dealt out across the board state. That's going to give you 10 zombies on the battlefield. Just imagine this volcano exploding with zombies falling onto the battlefield and your opponents are left dealing with the wreckage. Oh, that's what makes Magic so much fun. Your zombie friends at your local gaming store are going to be like, yeah, that's pretty sweet, man. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. This is what makes Magic great. You get to run different, win conditions like that, Volcano Zombies. And this is what I'm talking about. If you get Volcano Zombies to resolve, even though you may not win the game right then and there, you've won in your heart, and that's what matters. So, now some of the good utility lands you can run in your deck: Vesuva, Cascading Cataracts, Maze of Ith. With Cataracts, it's going to work out really well with Golos' activated ability, being able to add that 5 mana to your mana pool. Because if you are building a 5-color deck, typically you're going to shift towards one wedge in particular. You may splash a few different colors here and there. So having the actual 5-color activation that you can go for is a really nice effect to have. And then Vesuva, you can have this enter the battlefield as a copy of Maze's End. That's really going to speed up a lot of those Maze's End activations. And then Maze of Ith, that's going to allow you to kind of remove a creature from attacking and hopefully kind of protect some of your life total. Same thing with Wasteland and Field of Ruin. You want to keep your opponent's lands in check. You can keep playing these out of the graveyard. I'm not a huge Wasteland lock fan, but with this deck, you can make a lot of extra land drops. You can go for a lot of Wasteland activations. So if that's something that you want to do, you want to put the hurt on somebody, hey, that is an option. So, but if you don't want to go for Wasteland or you don't have the card, Field of Ruin is a great option because that does allow you to at least grab a basic and allow your opponents to grab a basic too. So it's going to keep that land destruction in check. If you're playing against Gonti, you definitely want to deal with their Coffers or Urborg. And so having Field of Ruin, that is definitely a good option for that. And of course, last but not least, we have the value land plays that we can go for. Zyndakar's Royal, that's going to make these lands enter the battlefield, get those extra tokens going. Like we talked about earlier, we have the Garruk Wildspeaker activation of getting that +3/+3 and giving them trample. You get down Zyndakar's Royal, you make extra land drops. You're just going to build up a board state that's going to be hard for your opponent to deal with. Same thing with Horn of Greed. The thing with Horn of Greed you do need to watch out for is whenever any player plays a land, they get a land drop. But one of the main reasons you run it in a land-heavy deck is that you can make land drops quicker than your opponent, so hopefully you can utilize that card advantage quicker. It's kind of like playing Necasaur. Hold on, Dorothy. My production assistant. Sorry about that. It's kind of like playing Necasaur. You want to be able to take advantage of that card advantage quicker than your opponent can, and then just bury him with it. And same thing with Sylvan Awakening. If you've never gone for Sylvan Awakening, it is so much fun. You go for that untap all lanes you control. They become, not untap, but until end of turn, all lanes you control become 2/2 elementals. They have haste, indestructible. You can swing in. Let's say that you just can't get anything going. You top deck Sylvan Awakening and just swing in for a ton of damage. Is a beautiful way to close out a deck. You've got Guildgate swinging across, you've got Coffers swinging across. It's just funny to see this whole motley crew of lands coming across and dealing damage to your opponent. But that's going to bring us to the end step. That's going to bring us to the end of the video. This was a very land-heavy focused approach to Golos. So if you have any sort of approaches you want to talk about, leave it in the comments. There's people that come across this deck tech. They want to find out more about building Golos. So make sure you leave any sort of card suggestion in the comments. People like to read it. I like to read it because it kind of gives me a different perspective on building decks, and it's always fun just to get different people's opinions on what can happen. But Golos is very happy to have it as a commander. We finally have a land commanders matters. I have Ramos as my land commander deck, and it's a little clunky sometimes, so I'm really excited to get this Mazes In deck going. But that's going to bring us to the end of the video, and if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.